The blood on her hands was her husband's. But Sarah Thornton felt nothing as she watched the marshal drag his body away from the saloon steps in Scottsbluff, Nebraska territory, where he had gambled away everything they owned before catching a bullet from a man whose wife he had insulted. It was March of 1867, and Sarah stood in the muddy street wearing a torn calico dress and boots with holes, her chestnut hair tangled around her shoulders, watching the only life she had known disappear around a corner. She was 22 years old, a widow, and completely alone in a frontier town that had no use for a woman without means. The spring winds cut through the valley where the North Platte River bent, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant mountains. "You got somewhere to go, madam?" the marshal asked when he returned, wiping his hands on his vest. His eyes held pity but no real concern. Sarah shook her head. Her husband had sold their wagon 2 weeks ago. Their small cabin outside town belonged to someone else now, payment for debts she had not known existed. She owned nothing but the clothes she wore and a small cloth bag containing a hairbrush, a photograph of her mother, and $3 silver she had hidden from her husband's grasping hands. "There is a boarding house for decent women down the street," the marshal said, already turning away. "Mrs. Henderson might have worked for you." But Sarah had already been to Mrs. Henderson. The boarding house was full, and the only work available was the kind that made decent women whisper. Sarah had no intention of ending up in one of the cribs on the edge of town, selling herself to miners and drifters. She would rather die in the wilderness. As the afternoon sun began its descent, Sarah walked away from Scottsbluff with nothing but her small bag and a determination born of desperation. She followed the North Platte River westward, knowing only that the mountains rose in that direction, and that somewhere in all that vast emptiness there had to be a place for her. Other women had made lives on the frontier. Surely she could too. The first night she slept under a cottonwood tree, shivering in the cold, listening to coyotes howl in the distance. The second day she found wild onions growing near the river and ate them raw, ignoring the way they burned her mouth. The third day she walked until her feet bled, and the fourth day she could barely walk at all. By the fifth day, Sarah had left the river behind, climbing into the foothills where ponderosa pines grew thick and the air smelled of resin and coming rain. She had not eaten in 2 days. Her water skin was empty. Her vision blurred at the edges, and she stumbled over rocks she should have seen, fell into bushes that tore new holes in her dress. When she finally collapsed in a small clearing surrounded by aspens, Sarah thought she might actually die there. The sky above was impossibly blue, and she watched clouds drift past, thinking how strange it was that the world could be so beautiful while she felt so broken. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, reading from the Bible about valleys of shadow and fearing no evil. But Sarah had never been particularly religious, and she felt plenty of fear now. She must have passed out because when she opened her eyes again, the sun had moved considerably, and someone was standing over her. Sarah's first thought was that he looked like something from a legend, like one of the mountain men her father had told stories about when she was a child. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the sun. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but she could see sharp blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore buckskin pants and a leather shirt that showed arms corded with muscle. A rifle was slung over one shoulder and a large hunting knife hung from his belt. "You lost." His voice was deep and rough, like he did not use it often. Sarah tried to sit up, but the world spun violently. "I am fine," she managed to say, though they both knew it was a lie. The mountain man crouched down beside her, moving with surprising grace for someone so large. Up close, she could see scars on his hands and forearms, evidence of a hard life lived in harsh conditions. "You are not fine. You are half dead." His eyes took in her torn dress, her bleeding feet, the hollow look of starvation in her face. "When did you last eat?" "I don't remember," Sarah admitted. Pride seemed pointless now. He studied her for a long moment, then reached into a leather pouch at his belt. What he pulled out was not much, just a piece of dried bread wrapped in cloth, the kind trappers carried because it kept for weeks. He held it out to her without a word. Sarah stared at it. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, but then she hesitated. "Is this all you have?" "Take it," he said simply. But Sarah had seen the way his pouch hung nearly flat against his hip, had noticed the lean look in his face that spoke of his own hunger. This was his last piece of bread. She was certain of it. She took it from his calloused palm, felt the weight of it, and then, before he could protest, she broke it cleanly in half. "We share it," she said, holding one piece back out to him. The mountain man stared at her like she had done something completely unexpected. His blue eyes widened slightly and something shifted in his expression, a crack in the hard exterior. "You are starving," he said slowly. "So are you." Sarah kept her hand extended, her arm shaking with the effort. "We share it or I don't take it at all." For several long seconds he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and took the half she offered. His fingers brushed against hers, rough and warm, and Sarah felt something pass between them in that moment, some understanding that went beyond words. They ate in silence, and though half a piece of dried bread was not nearly enough to fill the emptiness in Sarah's stomach, it was the best thing she had ever tasted because it was given freely and shared equally. "Sam Owens," the mountain man said when he finished eating, wiping crumbs from his beard. "Most people call me Sam." "Sarah Thornton," she replied. "Most people called me Mrs. Thornton, but I suppose that does not matter anymore." Sam's eyes flicked to her left hand, where a thin gold band still circled her finger. "Widow, as of 5 days ago." Sarah saw no point in explaining the circumstances. "I was walking away from Scottsbluff and just kept walking." "Scottsbluff is 3 days' walk from here, and that is for someone who knows the country." Sam shook his head slowly. "You are lucky you made it this far." "I don't feel very lucky. You are alive." He stood up, towering over her again. "And you will stay that way if you come with me. I have a cabin another hour's walk north. There is food there, and water, and a place to sleep that does not involve being eaten by a bear." Sarah knew she should be cautious. Her husband had taught her that men could not be trusted, that they wanted only one thing from women and would take it by force if necessary. But Sam had given her his last food, and something in his eyes seemed honest, weary but decent. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Sam was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the mountains rising in the west. "I have been alone in these mountains for 4 years, he finally said. "In that time, I have helped exactly 3 people. A trapper with a broken leg, a Lakota boy who got separated from his family during a storm, and now you. I help because it is the right thing to do, and because these mountains are hard enough without people turning their backs on each other." He held out his hand to help her up. Sarah looked at it, at the scars and calluses that spoke of endless hard work, and then placed her small hand in his. His grip was gentle despite his obvious strength, and he pulled her to her feet carefully, steadying her when she swayed. "Can you walk?" he asked. Sarah tested her feet and winced. "I will manage." But Sam could see the blood seeping through her ruined boots. Without asking permission, he simply swept her up into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. Sarah gasped, instinctively clutching at his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath the leather. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Not on those feet." Sam adjusted her weight slightly and began walking north through the aspens. "Save your pride for when you are not bleeding all over the mountainside." Sarah wanted to argue, but the truth was she felt relieved. Her body ached everywhere, and being carried meant she could finally stop forcing herself to take another step. She let her head rest against Sam's broad chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. True to his word, Sam's cabin appeared about an hour later, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. It was larger than Sarah had expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney rising from one end. A small creek bubbled nearby, and she could see a vegetable garden plot, empty now in early spring but ready for planting. A lean-to stable sheltered 2 horses and a mule, and various furs hung stretched on frames near the cabin wall. Sam carried her inside and set her down carefully on a chair near the cold fireplace. The cabin's interior was neat and practical. A large bed covered in furs occupied one corner. A rough-hewn table and chairs sat near the fireplace, and shelves lined the walls holding supplies, tools, and cooking equipment. Strings of dried herbs hung from the rafters, along with more furs and what looked like smoked meat wrapped in cloth. "Let me see your feet," Sam said, kneeling in front of her. Sarah hesitated, then slowly lifted one foot. Sam unlaced her boots with surprising gentleness and eased them off. Her stockings were soaked with blood, and when he carefully peeled them away, they both could see the damage. Blisters had burst and bled. Her soles were cut in multiple places, and her toes were swollen and bruised. Sam's jaw tightened as he examined them, but he said nothing. He simply stood and went to one of the shelves, returning with a basin, cloth bandages, and a small tin of salve. He filled the basin with water from a barrel near the door, then knelt before her again. "This might hurt," he warned, then began cleaning her feet with careful, practiced movements. Sarah bit her lip against the pain, determined not to cry out. She watched Sam work, noting the concentration in his face, the way his large hands moved with unexpected delicacy. When he applied the salve, it smelled of pine and something else she could not identify, but the cool sensation immediately eased the burning. "What is that?" she asked. "Something I learned from the Lakota. Pine resin, bear fat, and yarrow. It keeps infection away." He wrapped her feet in clean bandages, securing them carefully. "You will need to stay off them for a few days." "I cannot impose on you like that," Sarah said automatically, though she had no idea where else she would go. Sam stood and looked down at her with those intense blue eyes. "You broke your half of the bread in 2 and shared it with me. That makes us partners of a sort. Partners help each other." He moved to the fireplace and began building a fire. "Besides, I could use help around here. 4 years alone is a long time. If you are willing to work once your feet heal, you can stay as long as you need." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, though she fought them back. "I am a hard worker," she said. "I can cook and clean, and I know how to tend a garden. My mother taught me herb lore and sewing. I can earn my keep. I believe you." Sam got the fire going, and warmth began to fill the cabin. Then he went to his supplies and started pulling down food. Dried venison, smoked fish, a small bag of cornmeal, some withered potatoes from last fall's harvest, and a precious jar of honey. "First things first, we get some real food in you." Sam cooked with the efficiency of a man who had been feeding himself for years. He made a simple stew with the meat and potatoes, then mixed cornmeal with water and honey to make johnny cakes that he cooked on a flat stone near the fire. The smell alone was enough to make Sarah's mouth water. When the food was ready, Sam filled 2 bowls with equal portions and handed one to Sarah with a spoon carved from horn. They ate sitting at his table, and Sarah could not remember ever tasting anything so good. The meat was tender, the potatoes soft, and the Johnny cakes sweet and filling. "How did you end up out here?" Sarah asked between bites. 4 years is a long time to be alone. Sam was quiet for a while, chewing slowly. "I came west after the war," he finally said. "Fought for the Union, saw things no man should see. When it ended, I could not go back to Ohio and pretend everything was normal. I needed silence, needed space, so I came to the mountains and stayed." "Do you trap?" Sarah asked, thinking of the furs outside. "Some. I hunt mostly, trade furs and meat in Scottsbluff a few times a year for supplies I cannot make myself. It is a simple life, but it is honest, and no one is shooting at me." He met her eyes across the table. "What about you? How does a woman end up walking into the wilderness alone?" Sarah told him, keeping her voice steady as she explained about her husband's gambling, his death, losing everything. She did not mention the beatings or the nights she had hidden money just to have enough for food, because he would have spent it all on cards and whiskey. Some shames were too deep to speak aloud, even to a stranger who had shown her kindness. When she finished, Sam nodded slowly. "You are better off without him, then. A man who cannot take care of his wife is not much of a man." "The problem is I have no idea what to do now," Sarah admitted. "I have no family, no money, no prospects. I was walking into the mountains because I had nowhere else to go." "You have somewhere now," Sam said simply. "Stay here. Help me with the work. When your feet heal and you are strong again, if you want to go back to civilization, I will take you to Scottsbluff with enough money to start over. But if you want to stay, you can do that too. These mountains are big enough for 2 people, and I meant what I said about needing help." Sarah searched his face for any sign of ulterior motives, but she saw only honest intention. "You would do that. Just let a stranger stay in your home. You shared your bread with me when you were starving," Sam said. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character." That night, Sam gave Sarah his bed, piling furs on the floor near the fire for himself despite her protests. She lay in the darkness, her stomach full for the first time in days, her feet bandaged and aching less, and listened to Sam's deep breathing across the room. She thought about the strange turn her life had taken, how close she had come to dying alone in the wilderness, and how this massive, quiet man had appeared like something from a story to save her. Sleep claimed her quickly, deeper and more peaceful than she had known in years. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Sarah's feet healed slowly under Sam's careful ministrations. Each morning he would check the bandages, apply more salve, and shake his head when she tried to stand too soon. While she recovered, she kept herself useful in small ways, mending his clothes with needle and thread from his supplies, organizing his shelves, and teaching him a few tricks her mother had known about preserving herbs. Sam would disappear for hours each day, hunting or checking trap lines, and return with game or fish. He was an excellent provider, moving through the wilderness with the confidence of someone who understood it completely. Sarah watched him skin a deer one afternoon with swift, practiced movements, his muscled arms flexing beneath his leather shirt, and felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. After a week, Sarah insisted on testing her feet. Sam helped her stand, hovering close in case she fell, and Sarah took careful steps around the cabin. It hurt, but not unbearably, and she felt a surge of triumph. "I can start helping more now," she said, smiling up at Sam. It was the first real smile she had given him, and she saw something flicker in his eyes in response. "Don't push too hard," he cautioned. "But if you are up for it, I could use help planting the garden. Spring is the right time, and 2 people can get it done faster than one." They worked together over the next few days, preparing the soil and planting seeds Sam had saved from the previous year along with some he had bought in Scottsbluff. Potatoes, beans, squash, carrots, and herbs. Sarah knew gardens intimately from her childhood, and she found herself giving advice that Sam accepted readily, acknowledging gaps in his own knowledge. "My mother could grow anything," Sarah said one afternoon as they worked side by side in the warm sun. "She had a garden in Illinois that was the envy of the whole county. She tried to teach me everything she knew before she died." "How old were you when you lost her?" Sam asked, his hands deep in the soil. 15. Fever took her one winter. Sarah planted a bean seed carefully. "My father followed 2 years later. Heart just gave out, the doctor said, but I think it was grief. He loved her more than anything." "That is how it should be," Sam said quietly. "A man should love his wife like that." Sarah glanced at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "Did you ever come close to marrying?" Sam was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he sat back on his heels, looking out at the mountains. "There was a girl before the war, Emma. We were going to marry when I came back." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But the man who came back from that war was not the same man who left, and I could see it in her eyes when she looked at me. She was afraid of what I had become, so I left before she had to say it out loud." Sarah felt her heart ache for him. She reached out without thinking and placed her dirt-covered hand over his. "I am not afraid of you," she said softly. Sam looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. Something passed between them again, that same electric connection she had felt when they first shared the bread. "You should be," he said, but there was no threat in it, only sadness. "I have killed men, Sarah, more than I can count. The war made me good at it, and I am not sure that ever really leaves a person." "You gave me your last food," Sarah said, holding his gaze. "You carried me to safety and tended my wounds and asked nothing in return. Whatever you were forced to do in the war does not change who you are now." Sam's hand turned under hers, his fingers curling around her smaller hand, engulfing it in warmth and calluses. They stayed like that for a long moment, neither speaking, just connected in the spring sunshine with the mountains rising around them and the future uncertain, but somehow less frightening than it had been. That evening, Sam caught a string of trout from the creek, and Sarah cooked them with wild herbs she had found near the water. They ate outside, sitting on a log bench Sam had made, watching the sun set behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and gold. "I want to stay," Sarah said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not just for a while, I want to stay here with you if you will have me." Sam turned to look at her, his blue eyes catching the last light. "This is a hard life, Sarah. Winter here is brutal. We will be snowed in for months. There are bears and mountain lions. The nearest town is 3 days away. You would be isolated, cut off from other women, from society. I know all that." Sarah set down her plate and faced him fully. "But I feel more alive here in this 1 week than I did in 3 years of marriage. I feel useful and needed and safe. I don't want to go back to Scottsbluff or any other town. I want to stay here and build a life in these mountains." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "With you, if you want the same thing." Sam reached up and pushed a strand of hair back from her face, his touch gentle. "I want it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "From the moment you broke that bread in half, I wanted it, but I needed to know you understood what you would be choosing." "I understand," Sarah said, leaning into his touch. "I am choosing you, Sam Owens. I am choosing this life." Sam pulled her close then, wrapping his massive arms around her and holding her against his chest. Sarah felt his heart beating strong and steady, felt safe in a way she had never experienced before. When he tilted her chin up and kissed her, it was tender and questioning, asking permission even as he gave it. Sarah kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the gratitude and growing affection and hope for the future. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Sam rested his forehead against hers. "We should do this properly," he said. "There is a circuit preacher who comes through Scottsbluff every few months. We could go to town, get married the right way." "When is he due to come through?" Sarah asked. "Not for another 2 months at least." Sam smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less burdened. "But I am willing to wait if you are. I want to do right by you, Sarah." Sarah felt warmth bloom in her chest. Her first marriage had been rushed, forced by her father's debts and her own naivety. This time, she wanted to choose it freely, to build something real with a man who saw her as an equal partner. "Then we wait," she agreed. "And in the meantime, we build our life together." The next 2 months passed in a blur of work and growing intimacy. Sam and Sarah fell into a partnership that felt natural and right, each complementing the other's strengths. Sam hunted and trapped, bringing home meat and furs. Sarah tended the garden, cooked, preserved food, and improved the cabin in countless small ways, making curtains from spare fabric, weaving baskets from willow branches, creating a home from what had been merely a shelter. They talked endlessly, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Sam told her about the war, about the friends he had lost, about the nightmares that still sometimes woke him in the dark. Sarah told him about her difficult marriage, about the fear she had lived with, about how she had almost given up hope that life could be anything better. "You are so strong," Sam told her one evening as they sat by the fire. "Stronger than you realize." "Walking into those mountains alone took more courage than most people ever have." "I did not feel courageous," Sarah admitted. "I felt desperate and terrified." "Courage is not the absence of fear," Sam said, taking her hand in his. "It is acting despite the fear. You did that. You survived." As the weather grew warmer, they ventured further from the cabin together. Sam taught Sarah to fish in the creek, laughing when she squealed the first time a trout took her hook. Sarah showed Sam which wild plants were edible, knowledge her mother had passed down. They worked side by side, improving the cabin, adding storage and reinforcing the roof for the coming winter. And slowly, inevitably, their physical affection grew. Held hands became lingering touches. Goodnight kisses became longer, deeper. Sam was always careful, always respectful of the boundaries Sarah set, but she could feel the desire in him, matched by her own growing need. One night, about 6 weeks after they had met, Sarah lay in the bed while Sam prepared to settle by the fire as usual. But instead of saying good night, she spoke up. "Sam, would you stay with me tonight, just to hold me?" Sam froze, then turned slowly. "Sarah, I don't want you to feel pressured. We are waiting to marry for a reason." "I know," Sarah said, sitting up. "And I am not asking for more than you are willing to give before we are wed. But I am tired of sleeping alone when you are right there. I want to fall asleep in your arms and wake up beside you. Is that so wrong?" Sam's eyes blazed with something intense, but he nodded. "No, it is not wrong." He moved to the bed, still fully dressed in his buckskin pants and shirt, and climbed in carefully. Sarah immediately curled against his side, resting her head on his broad chest and draping an arm across his muscled stomach. Sam's arms came around her, holding her close, and Sarah sighed contentedly. "This is perfect," she murmured. "Yes," Sam agreed, his voice rumbling through his chest. "It is." They fell asleep that way and woke together as dawn light filtered through the window. Sarah opened her eyes to find Sam already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning," he replied and kissed her forehead. "Ready to start another day, with you, always." After that night, They shared the bed, though Sam maintained strict boundaries about how far their physical affection went. Sarah both appreciated and was frustrated by his restraint. She wanted him, wanted to be his completely, but she also recognized the wisdom in waiting. Their marriage would be built on a foundation stronger than just desire. Finally, the day came to make the journey to Scottsbluff. Sam loaded his mule with furs to trade, and they rode his 2 horses down from the mountains, Sarah sitting astride like a man because she had no side saddle, and Sam insisted it was safer anyway. The 3-day journey was an adventure. They camped under the stars, Sam teaching Sarah to read the night sky and telling her stories of different constellations. They followed game trails and creek beds, saw elk and deer, once spotted a black bear in the distance. Sam was attentive and protective, always making sure Sarah was safe and comfortable. When they finally arrived in Scottsbluff, Sarah felt strange walking those streets again as a completely different person than she had been 2 months before. She was stronger now, healthier, sun-browned from working outside. She wore a dress she had remade from spare fabric in Sam's supplies, and while it was plain, it was clean and whole. They went directly to the trading post where Sam sold his furs for a good price, then to the general store where they bought supplies they would need: sugar, coffee, salt, flour, and fabric for Sarah to make new clothes. Then they asked about the preacher. "Pastor Williams just arrived yesterday," the store owner said. "He is staying at the boarding house and holding services tomorrow. You looking to get married?" "We are," Sam said firmly, his hand on Sarah's back. The store owner's wife, who had been listening, smiled broadly. "How wonderful. You will want to look nice for your wedding, dear. Come with me. I have some fabric that would make a lovely dress." She took Sarah to the back of the store and showed her a bolt of soft blue cotton printed with tiny white flowers. "This would look beautiful on you," she said. "And I happen to have a pattern. I could have it sewn up by tomorrow morning if you are willing to pay extra." Sarah looked at Sam, who nodded. "Whatever she wants," he said, so it was settled. They spent that night in the boarding house in separate rooms, one final night apart before they would be joined forever. Sarah barely slept, excitement and nervousness warring in her chest. The next morning, the store owner's wife delivered the dress, and it fit perfectly. Sarah braided her hair and coiled it at the nape of her neck, wishing she had flowers to weave into it, but settling for looking as neat and presentable as possible. The wedding took place in the small church at noon. Pastor Williams was a kind, older man who asked them both about their intentions and seemed satisfied with their answers. There were a few witnesses, townspeople who had come for the regular Sunday service and stayed for the wedding. When Sam saw Sarah in her new dress, walking toward him down the aisle of the little church, something profound shifted in his expression. His eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away, and when she reached him, he took both her hands in his like they were precious treasures. "You are beautiful," he whispered. Pastor Williams led them through the traditional vows. When it came time for Sam to speak his promises, his deep voice rang clear and certain through the church. "I, Samuel Owens, take you, Sarah Thornton, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, to provide for you, to honor you all the days of my life. I promise to share everything I have with you, just as you shared your bread with me, and to build a life together in these mountains that will stand against any storm." Sarah's voice shook with emotion as she gave her own vows. "I, Sarah Thornton, take you, Samuel Owens, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you, to work alongside you, to build our home and our life together. I promise to share in your joys and your sorrows, to be your partner in all things, and to love you with my whole heart for as long as we both shall live." Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, and Sam kissed Sarah with a tenderness that belied his great strength. The small congregation applauded, and several women dabbed at their eyes. Afterward, the boarding house owner, Mrs. Henderson, the same woman who had turned Sarah away 2 months before, approached them. "I want to apologize," she said to Sarah. "When you came to me before, I was not kind. I judged your situation without knowing the facts. I can see now that you have found where you belong, and I wish you both every happiness." Sarah accepted the apology graciously, feeling no bitterness. That desperate woman who had walked away from Scottsbluff barely existed anymore. She was someone new now, someone stronger and happier. Sam and Sarah spent their wedding night in the boarding house's best room. When Sam closed the door behind them, he looked at Sarah with such intensity that she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I have been waiting for this moment," he said roughly, trying to be patient and respectful. "But Sarah, my wife, I need you to know that I love you. I have loved you since you broke that bread in half and showed me what true kindness and partnership mean." "I love you too," Sarah said, moving toward him. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you carried me to your cabin and took care of me when you had no reason to." Sam pulled her close, and this time when they kissed, there was nothing held back. His hands roamed over her dress, and Sarah's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, both of them eager to finally be fully joined. What followed was tender and passionate, two people who had found each other against all odds coming together in love and commitment. Afterward, lying in Sam's arms in the darkness, Sarah thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The tragedy and loss, the desperate walk into the wilderness, the chance encounter that had changed everything. "What are you thinking?" Sam asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I am grateful," Sarah said, "for all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me to you." Sam kissed the top of her head. "We are going to build something good together, Sarah, I promise you that." "I know," she said. "We already have." They returned to the mountain cabin 3 days later, traveling slowly and stopping often, in no hurry now that they had a lifetime ahead of them. When they arrived home, for that was truly what it was now, they immediately began making plans for the future. "We should expand the cabin before winter," Sam said, surveying their home with new eyes. "Add another room, maybe 2. We will need the space eventually." Sarah understood what he was implying and felt a flutter of excitement and nervousness. Children. A family. The idea terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Summer passed in hard work and deep contentment. They expanded the cabin, adding a second bedroom and a larger storage area. The garden flourished under Sarah's care, producing more vegetables than they could eat, so she learned from Sam how to preserve them for winter. They smoked meat, dried herbs, filled their storage with supplies to see them through the hard months ahead. In late July, Sarah realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month to be certain, then told Sam one evening as they sat outside watching the stars. "I am with child," she said simply. Sam's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face split into a wide grin and he pulled her into his arms, holding her gently as if she might break. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "But yes, very happy." "I will take care of you," Sam promised. "Both of you, I swear it." As autumn painted the mountains in gold and red, they prepared for the coming winter and the baby who would arrive in early spring. Sam hunted with renewed determination, putting away even more meat than usual. Sarah sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands shaking slightly as she imagined the child who would wear them. One afternoon in September, they were working outside when they heard horses approaching. Sarah tensed, but Sam laid a calm hand on her shoulder. "Wait here," he said, then stepped forward to greet the visitors. 3 men rode into the clearing, rough-looking trappers by their clothing and equipment. The leader, a man with a scarred face and cruel eyes, looked around the property with undisguised interest. "Nice setup you have here," he said to Sam. "Real nice. Must get lonely, though, all the way out here." "I manage," Sam said evenly. Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand stayed near his knife. The scarred man's eyes found Sarah, and something ugly flickered across his face. "Well, well, not so lonely after all. That your wife, mountain man?" "She is," Sam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "And you will show her respect or leave now." The 3 trappers exchanged glances, and Sarah felt fear spike through her. There were 3 of them and only one of Sam. But Sam stood like a mountain himself, radiating a quiet threat that made even these hard men hesitate. "We don't want any trouble," one of the other trappers said quickly. "Just passing through, looking for a place to camp for the night." "The creek is yours," Sam said, gesturing away from the cabin. "But you camp downstream and you leave at first light. My wife and I value our privacy." The scarred man looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Sam's eyes must have convinced him otherwise. "Sure, mountain man. Downstream. We will be gone by morning." They rode on, and Sam stayed outside until they had disappeared into the trees. Then he turned to Sarah, who had been watching with her heart in her throat. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "Enough for a few days. We are going to sleep in the old trapper's cabin up in the high meadow. I don't trust them." Sarah did not argue. She gathered food, blankets, and essentials, while Sam loaded his rifle and checked his pistol. Then they slipped away from the cabin through the woods, following a path only Sam knew to a small, abandoned cabin hidden in the mountains above their home. The old cabin was rough and cold, but Sam got a fire going and they settled in to wait. "You think they will try something?" Sarah asked. "Men like that, you never know," Sam said. "But I am not taking chances with you, especially now." He placed a protective hand on her still flat stomach. They spent an uncomfortable night in the old cabin, Sam barely sleeping as he kept watch. At dawn, he left Sarah safely hidden and crept back down to their home. What he found made his blood boil. The 3 trappers had not left. Instead, they were breaking into the cabin, clearly intending to steal supplies. Sam watched from the trees as they looted his home, anger burning in his chest. When they finally rode away, laden with stolen goods, Sam emerged and assessed the damage. They had taken food, ammunition, some furs, but they had also destroyed things out of spite. Furniture was broken, Sarah's carefully made curtains torn down, her garden trampled. Sam could have tracked them down. Part of him, the part that had been a soldier, wanted to hunt them and make them pay for violating his home. But Sarah was waiting for him, pregnant and vulnerable, and she was more important than revenge. He returned to the high cabin and told Sarah what had happened. Her face crumpled when she heard about her garden, all her hard work destroyed. "We will plant it again next spring," Sam said, pulling her close. "Everything they took, we can replace. What matters is we are safe." They spent another night in the high cabin, then returned home to begin repairs. It took weeks to set everything right, to replant the autumn garden, to replace what was stolen. But they did it together, and somehow that made the work feel less heavy. Winter arrived early that year, snows falling thick in November. True to Sam's warning, they were snowed in by December, the drifts piling so high around the cabin that stepping outside required tunneling through walls of white. But they were prepared with plenty of food and firewood, and the cabin stayed warm and cozy. Those long winter months were some of the happiest of Sarah's life. She and Sam lived in their own small world, talking and laughing, working on projects to pass the time. Sam carved wooden spoons and bowls while Sarah sewed and knitted. They played card games Sam had learned in the army and read aloud from the few books Sam owned. As Sarah's belly grew, Sam became impossibly more protective and tender. He insisted she rest more, took over most of the heavy work, and spent long evenings with his hand on her stomach, marveling when he felt the baby kick. "Do you hope for a boy or girl?" Sarah asked him one evening. "I hope for healthy," Sam said simply. "Boy or girl does not matter to me as long as you both come through it safe." The isolation Sarah had feared turned out to be less difficult than she expected. She missed other women sometimes, wished she had someone experienced to ask about the changes in her body and what to expect during birth. But Sam did his best, sharing what little he knew from being present when animals gave birth and promising her that he would do everything in his power to keep her safe. Spring arrived slowly, snow melting to reveal new green growth. Sarah was huge now, her belly so large she could barely move comfortably. Sam had made her a rocking chair, and she spent hours sitting in it, knitting and waiting for the baby to decide it was time. The labor started on a warm April morning, just as the wild flowers were beginning to bloom. Sarah's water broke while she was making breakfast, and she looked at Sam with wide, frightened eyes. "It is time," she said. Sam's face went pale beneath his beard, but he jumped into action with military efficiency. He had prepared for this, had clean cloths and water and everything the one medical book he owned said would be needed. He helped Sarah to the bed, held her hand through the early contractions, and tried not to let his own fear show. The labor was long and difficult. Sarah had no mother or midwife to guide her, only Sam, and he did the best he could. He wiped her face with cool water, held her hands when the pains grew intense, murmured encouragements when she cried that she could not do it. "You can," he insisted. "You are the strongest woman I know. You walked into the wilderness alone and survived. You can do this." Finally, as the sun began to set, filling the cabin with golden light, Sarah gave one final push and their child entered the world. Sam caught the baby expertly, his hands shaking as he wiped the tiny face, and the infant took its first breath and wailed. "A boy," Sam said, his voice choked with emotion. "Sarah, we have a son." He wrapped the baby carefully and placed him in Sarah's arms. She looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature and felt overwhelming love surge through her. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He looks like you," Sam said, sitting beside them on the bed. "He has your nose." They named him Daniel after Sarah's father and Samuel as his middle name. Daniel Samuel Owens, born in a mountain cabin far from civilization, the first of what would eventually be 4 children. The early days of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Daniel was a healthy baby with strong lungs, and he kept them both busy. Sam proved to be a devoted father, taking on every task with the same competence he showed in everything else. He changed soiled cloths without complaint, walked Daniel around the cabin when he fussed, and looked at his son with such profound love that Sarah often felt tears come to her eyes. As spring turned to summer, they fell into new routines. Sarah managed the house and baby while her strength returned, and Sam hunted and tended the garden they had replanted. They worked as partners in all things, sharing the labor of their lives equally. When Daniel was 3 months old, they made the trip to Scottsbluff to register his birth and pick up supplies. The town had grown since their last visit, more settlers arriving to try their hand at frontier life. Several women approached Sarah when they saw the baby, cooing over Daniel and inviting her to join their sewing circle. "Come back in August," one woman named Margaret said. "We meet every 2 weeks at the church. It would be good for you to have friends." Sarah was tempted. She did miss female companionship, But Scottsbluff was 3 days away, and leaving the mountain felt wrong somehow. "Maybe," she said noncommittally. On the way home, she talked to Sam about it. "Do you think I am strange for not wanting to join their group?" she asked. "Most women would jump at the chance." "You are not most women," Sam said. "You are a mountain woman now, as wild and free as the elk and the eagles. If you are happy with our life, that is all that matters." "I am happy," Sarah said, and meant it completely. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple pleasures. Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Emily, 2 years after Daniel, then another son, James, 2 years after that. And finally, when Sarah was 31 and Sam 34, twin girls arrived, Alice and Anna, completing their family with 2 surprises at once. The cabin expanded again to hold their growing family. Sam added a loft where the older children slept, and another room off the back for storage. They bought another cow from a trading post, chickens for eggs, and a pig that Daniel insisted on naming Rosie. Life was never easy. Winters were brutal, illness came sometimes. Wild animals threatened their livestock, and they worked from dawn until dark most days. But through it all, Sarah and Sam stood together, sharing everything equally, just as they had shared that first piece of bread. Daniel grew into a strong, capable boy who idolized his father and learned everything Sam could teach about hunting and tracking. Emily was quiet and thoughtful, always with her nose in one of the books Sam traded for in town. James was adventurous and constantly getting into trouble, coming home with scraped knees and tales of narrow escapes. And the twins, Alice and Anna, were whirlwinds of energy who could barely be told apart. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Sam and Sarah sat outside their cabin, watching their 5 children play in the clearing. Daniel, now 9, was teaching his younger siblings to fish in the creek. Emily, 7, was reading under a tree while simultaneously keeping an eye on 5-year-old James, who was climbing higher than he should. The 3-year-old twins chased each other in circles, their laughter ringing through the mountains. "Can you believe this is our life?" Sarah asked, leaning against Sam's broad shoulder. "Sometimes I think about that day you found me, half dead in the wilderness, and I can barely remember being that person." "You were always strong," Sam said, wrapping an arm around her. "You just needed a chance to show it." "We built something good here," Sarah said. "Something real." "We did," Sam agreed. "And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still, watching these children grow, maybe seeing grandchildren someday." Sarah smiled at the thought. "Do you ever regret it? Living so far from everything and everyone?" Sam was quiet for a moment, then shook his head firmly. "Not for a second. This life, here with you and our children, is everything I could want. I found my peace in these mountains, and I found my purpose in loving you and building our family." "I love you," Sarah said, tilting her face up for a kiss. "I love you too," Sam replied, obliging her with a kiss that was tender and familiar after 10 years together. "From that first moment when you broke the bread, I loved you." As the years continued to pass, their children grew and eventually began making their own ways in the world. Daniel, at 18, decided he wanted to see more of the country before settling down. Sam and Sarah supported his decision, though Sarah cried when he rode away toward Scottsbluff and points beyond. Emily, at 16, surprised them both by falling in love with the schoolteacher's son when they went to town one summer. She married at 17 and moved to Scottsbluff, promising to visit often. James, predictably, became a scout and guide, using all the wilderness skills his father had taught him to lead wagon trains and hunting parties through the mountains. He was rarely home but sent letters and money when he could. The twins, inseparable as always, stayed closer. Alice married a rancher whose property bordered the lower slopes of their mountains, and Anna married his brother. Both couples built homes within a day's ride of Sam and Sarah's cabin, so family gatherings remained frequent. When Sam and Sarah reached their late 50s, they finally slowed down. Sam's hair had gone silver, his beard now more white than brown, but he was still strong and capable. Sarah's hands showed the wear of decades of hard work, and her hair was streaked with gray, but her eyes remained bright and her spirit undimmed. They sold off most of their livestock, keeping only a few chickens and a milk cow. They tended a smaller garden now, just enough for the two of them and their frequent visitors. And they spent more time simply sitting together, watching the mountains change with the seasons, talking about their life and all they had experienced together. On a particularly beautiful summer evening when they were both 62 years old, they sat outside as they had done countless times before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "You remember the first night we sat out here together?" Sarah asked. "After we got back from Scottsbluff as a married couple, I remember everything," Sam said. "Every moment with you is written in my memory." "We have been blessed," Sarah said softly. 5 healthy children, 12 grandchildren so far, a good life together. More than I ever dreamed possible when I was walking through the wilderness thinking I might die alone." "You shared your bread with me," Sam said, taking her weathered hand in his. "That single act of kindness changed both our lives. It showed me that even after all the darkness of war, there was still goodness in the world. You saved me, Sarah, every bit as much as I saved you that day." "We saved each other," Sarah corrected. "And we have been saving each other ever since, every single day." That winter was harsh, the snows coming early and deep as they had 35 years before when Sarah first arrived. But Sam and Sarah were comfortable and warm, their cabin well stocked, their love as strong as ever. One morning, Sarah woke to find Sam had already gotten up and made breakfast. He brought it to her on a tray, just as he occasionally had throughout their marriage when he wanted to spoil her. "What is the occasion?" she asked, smiling. "No occasion," Sam said, settling beside her. "I just wanted to make sure you knew how much I appreciate you, how much I love you, how grateful I am for every day we have had together." They ate breakfast in bed, talking and laughing, remembering all the years behind them and looking forward to whatever time remained ahead. In the spring, as the snow melted and new life emerged across the mountains, their family gathered for a celebration. All 5 children came home, bringing their spouses and children. The cabin overflowed with people, noise, and love. Daniel, now a successful merchant in Denver, had brought his wife and 3 children. Emily arrived from Scottsbluff with her husband and 4 children. James, finally settling down at 40, introduced them to his new bride, a strong frontier woman much like Sarah had been. And the twins came from their nearby ranches with their large families in tow. They spent a week together, 3 generations of Owens filling the mountain clearing with life and laughter. Sam sat in his rocking chair, surrounded by grandchildren clamoring for stories, and told them about their grandmother walking into the wilderness alone, about sharing bread with a stranger, about building a life from nothing. "The lesson," he said to them, "is that kindness matters. Sharing what little you have, treating people with respect and fairness, partnering with others instead of trying to do everything alone. That is how you build a life worth living. That is how your grandmother and I built all of this." Sarah watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Their children had grown into good people, raising good children of their own. The legacy they were leaving was not wealth or land, though they had some of both. It was love, kindness, partnership, and the knowledge that family mattered more than anything else. After the family gathering, life returned to its quiet rhythm. Sam and Sarah continued their gentle routines, caring for each other as they had for decades. When Sam's knees finally gave out from years of hard mountain life, Sarah made him special teas from herbs she gathered to ease the pain. When Sarah's eyesight began to fail, Sam read to her every evening from the Bible and the novels they had collected over the years. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by family again. By then, they had 20 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. The cabin could not hold everyone, so they set up tents outside and had a massive celebration that lasted 3 days. On their 50th anniversary, Sam woke early and rode down to Scottsbluff, despite Sarah's protests that he was too old for such a journey. He returned 2 days later with a gift he had commissioned months before: a painting of their cabin, done by a traveling artist who had visited the previous summer. It showed their home nestled in the mountains, smoke curling from the chimney, the garden in full bloom, and 2 figures sitting outside together. "So we can always remember," Sam said as he unveiled it. Sarah cried and kissed him and told him he was a foolish, sentimental old man. But she hung the painting in the place of honor over the fireplace, where it would stay for generations. They made it to 60 years together, a remarkable achievement for any couple, especially those who had lived such a rugged life. By then, Sam was 84 and Sarah 82. They moved slowly, their bodies worn from decades of hard work, but their minds remained sharp and their love undiminished. One evening in late summer, as they sat outside watching the sun set once again, Sam suddenly took Sarah's hand and held it tightly. "I need you to know," he said, his voice urgent, "that you made my life worth living. After the war, I was lost, just existing in these mountains with no real purpose. Then you appeared and you gave me everything: purpose, love, family, happiness. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah squeezed his hand, concerned by the intensity in his voice. "Sam, you are scaring me. What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," he said, smiling at her. "Everything is right. I just wanted to make sure you knew. I wanted to say it out loud while I still could." That night, Sam died peacefully in his sleep, his hand still holding Sarah's. When she woke and found him gone, Sarah did not scream or cry hysterically. She simply held him close one last time, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for sharing everything with me." The family gathered again for Sam's funeral. They buried him on the mountain he had loved, in a spot overlooking the cabin and the valley beyond. Daniel carved a headstone from local granite, simple but strong, just like his father. Everyone expected Sarah to move to town after that, to live with one of her children in comfort for her remaining years. But Sarah refused. "This is my home," she said firmly. "Your father and I built it together, and I am staying here until it is my time to join him." So her children took turns visiting, making sure she was never alone for long. James moved into the cabin with his wife to look after her, and Sarah appreciated having them there, even as she insisted she could manage just fine on her own. She lived another 2 years without Sam, keeping the cabin exactly as they had left it together. She tended a small garden, fed the chickens, and sat in her rocking chair telling stories to great-grandchildren about a mountain man who gave a starving woman his last piece of bread, and how she broke it in half so they could share. "That was the moment," she would tell them, "when I knew he was the right man. He gave me everything he had without hesitation, and I gave back to him. We shared everything from that day forward. That is what love is, children. Sharing equally, partnering together, taking care of each other no matter what comes." Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years and 3 months after Sam, at the age of 84. Her children found her in the morning, sitting in her rocking chair by the window where she could see the sunrise over the mountains, a blanket over her lap and a smile on her face. They buried her next to Sam, adding to the granite headstone so it read both their names and the words. They shared everything. The cabin remained in the family, passed down through generations. Sometimes it was lived in, sometimes it sat empty, but it was always maintained with love and care. The garden plot was still visible decades later, and wild flowers grew around the graves on the hill. Great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren came to visit the old homestead, hearing the family legend of Sarah and Sam, the woman who walked into the wilderness and the mountain man who saved her with his last piece of bread. The story became a touchstone for the family, a reminder of their heritage and the values that had built their legacy: kindness, generosity, partnership, love, sharing everything, the burdens and the joys, the food and the work, the life they built together from nothing. The painting Sam had commissioned still hung above the fireplace in the old cabin, colors fading with time but the image still clear. Two figures sitting together outside their mountain home, side by side, sharing everything just as they always had. And high on the mountain where they were buried, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying their story through the valleys and peaks, ensuring that even after everyone who remembered them personally was gone, the legend of their love would endure. A testament to what two people could build together when they chose partnership over selfishness, kindness over cruelty, and love over everything else. Their descendants spread across the West, carrying pieces of Sarah and Sam's legacy with them. Some became ranchers, others business people, still others teachers and doctors and explorers. But all of them knew the story of where they came from, of the woman who broke the bread in half, and the mountain man who built a life with her that lasted through eternity. 50 years after Sarah's death, on what would have been their 100th wedding anniversary, the entire extended family gathered at the old cabin for a reunion. There were over 200 descendants by then, spanning 5 generations. They cleaned the graves, repaired the cabin, planted flowers in the old garden, and told the story again to the youngest children. "Remember," the eldest among them said, Daniel's son who was now in his 70s, "that everything we are, everything our family has become, started with a simple act of kindness. A man sharing his last food with a stranger, a woman refusing to take without giving back. That is the foundation our family is built on, and we must never forget it." The family raised their glasses in a toast to Sarah and Sam, to the love that had started it all, to the life they built in the mountains that had rippled forward through time to create this vast family tree. And as the sun set over the mountains that evening, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors it had shown 100 years before when Sam and Sarah first sat outside their cabin as husband and wife, it seemed like their spirits were present, watching over the family they had created, proud of what their shared bread had grown into. The cabin stood for another century, maintained by the family trust that had been established. It became a historical landmark eventually, with a plaque telling the story of the Owens family and their remarkable heritage. Couples came from all over to see the place where such enduring love had flourished, hoping to capture some of that magic for themselves. And in quiet moments, when the wind blew just right through the pines and aspens, visitors swore they could hear echoes of laughter, the sound of children playing, and the gentle murmur of 2 voices talking together, sharing everything as they always had and always would, their love eternal as the mountains themselves. The end.